Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to present Steve Coogan with the Chaplin Britannia Award for Excellence in Comedy. This award is richly deserved by Steve, and it is especially poignant to present this to him since he and I recently portrayed Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy in the film Stan and Ollie. Now, as some of you may know, Stan Laurel, who Steve beautifully brought to life on screen, was an early friend of Charlie Chaplin's. And in fact, they performed together in the music hall shows of Fred Carno and traveled together by steamship to America for the first time and shared a dressing room during their stage performing days. So Stan and Charlie knew each other quite well. I recently came across a letter that Stan Laurel wrote to a friend where he expressed his thoughts on Charlie Chaplin. And the letter struck me as perfectly expressing my thoughts about my friend and coworker, Steve Coogan. Well, here are Stan's thoughts on Charlie Chaplin, which so remind me of Steve Coogan. October 14th, 1957. I have to agree with you about Chaplin being mean and cheap. He never, to my knowledge, had any consideration for anybody, financially or otherwise. He never had any time for any of his close friends who worked with him in the early days. I was closely associated with Charlie for 2 or 3 years. I was his understudy and shared rooms with him on many occasions, so I am fully aware of his idiosyncrasies. He was a very eccentric character, composed of many moods, at times of insanity, which I think developed further when he achieved fame and fortune. To my mind, he is still the greatest artist in his field. Yeah, that last part. Clapping for that last part, I take it. Now, Steve is not entirely similar to Chaplin in this description. He is not mean at all to his family and his current girlfriends. Nor is he cheap, as evidenced by his extensive collection of expensive sports cars, which he alone is allowed to drive. As for financial help to his friends, I know for a fact that Steve has made Rob Brydon much wealthier than he would have been without meeting him. And as for insanity, well, I think the police record speaks for itself. But aren't we all a little crazy in this business? Steve, some of us just get caught, you know. His many moods on set ranged from peevishness at the amount of milk in the tea brought to him, to jealousy about not having more prosthetics so he could, as he put it, compete with fat ass over here, to smug self-satisfaction on the many days he was called later than me and went home earlier because of my long makeup process. However, the final quote from Stan on Chaplin unfortunately rings truest of all. I must begrudgingly admit here publicly that Steve Coogan is in fact the greatest artist in the comedy field, in my opinion. Now, that is an opinion I am sure Steve will remind me of many, many, many times in the future if he ever returns my phone calls. But all this aside, I must add that I have found in Steve a true friend and a brother. Our bond was forged in the sweaty rehearsal halls of London and on stage in some of the same theaters where Laurel and Hardy themselves performed. I've never met someone with a more acute sense of comedy and how to successfully build it. He's a rogue, he's a charmer, he's one of the kindest people I've ever met and one of the best actors I have ever worked with in drama or comedy. The words of the great Alan Partridge, I think, sum up our time together best. Well, Sonia, that was classic intercourse.